Let's bring in our front bench to unpack some of this. With me tonight, former New Brunswick Liberal Premier Brian Gallant. He's now the CEO of Space Canada. Former Conservative Deputy Leader Lisa Raitt is here. She's the Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. CTV News political analyst and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as is the Toronto Star's Queen's Park Bureau Chief Rob Benzie. Hi, everybody. Very nice to see you. These comments and the reaction to them had been discussed already, Tom, and then I was kind of a little bit surprised today to see the statement of clarification. I've covered Mr. Poilievre's leadership for the last 3 years. I can't remember the last time there was a statement of clarification issued a few days after something like this had surfaced. What does that tell you about what might be happening behind the scenes?
Well, the retroactive reflections and the attempt to change what he actually said is an indication that he's in trouble with some parts of the Conservative base, and he had no choice but to start scrambling. I had to go back to the actual quote to make sure that I hadn't missed something, because now he says, of course, that he was talking about an individual that he names, Brenda Lucki. Here's the quote. The leadership of the RCMP is frankly just despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government. In the quotes that we just saw, both in the House and in writing, he's trying to say, one, it was about an individual. Two, he never attacked the institution. That's what he did in that quote. And he's a very articulate person. He knows what he's saying, and he knows what it means when he's saying it. I think he was rising to the sound of his own voice as he was speaking to a home audience. It was almost as if he was chatting in his living room with people from a media outlet that tend to push his point of view. This is dangerous for the Conservatives if they ever hope to form government. You can't have someone saying that even though the police have carried out a thorough investigation, that you know that a crime was committed and that it is a cover-up, because that was the other word that he used, a cover-up, that there was a decision not to prosecute criminally. There is a requirement. You have certain heights that have to be met in going over those barriers, and if you don't, you can't prosecute criminally. You know, I have to remind folks that Mr. Poilievre was just a backbencher when most of the things that he's talked about happens. I was the leader of the opposition. And can I share with the people listening tonight, I was a bit frustrated. I thought the Aga Khan Island thing was more than just a scandal that merited a rap on the wrists from the ethics commissioner. But I'm also a lawyer, and I have a son who's been a police officer for 25 years, and I really take offense at hearing one of the most senior politicians in our country attacking an institution, attacking its entire leadership, because that's what he did. He did not single out an individual in a single case. He singled out the leader. He talked about the leadership. I find it offensive, and I find it dangerous for our democracy, because in a free and democratic society, politicians don't get to wake up in the morning and say, I want this one prosecuted, and if you don't do it, it's because you're covering things up and you're not doing your job. And even 9 years later, I'll attack you personally. It's bonkers, and I think he's pushed back a lot of Canadians who might have been willing to give him and the Conservatives a second look. I don't think that sort of behavior is going to help his party in any way, shape, or form.
Lisa, I was thinking back today to all the SNC stuff, because that's what it brings back. And I remember how many times I was interviewing you at that time, and different, Marco Mendicino at that time. Like, it was day in and day out. I remember when that stuff was litigated for sure. Yeah. Why do you think the comments as they came through this week garnered the reaction they did? And why do you think ultimately that statement of clarification was issued today?
And I would go back to saying, why are we talking about Justin Trudeau? Why are we going back there? What's the connectivity to Mark Carney? That's my frustration with all of this. The leader was grossly imprecise in his original comments, and I'll give him that. I'll give him that. If he's saying that he meant to say Brenda Lucki, fine. But he was grossly imprecise when he did that. And the danger of something like that is you end up putting offside people who vote for you. I mean, I served in cabinet with Shelley Glover, who was an RCMP officer, who I'm sure would not take kindly to comments like that in terms of the general population. I'm glad the leader came out and made a very good clarification. I think that's appropriate. But I go back to the original stuff. Why are we talking about this? You know, the voters of today, the kids who are just turning 18 and the ones who are up to age 30, they don't remember. And I would point one other thing out too, Vashi, and this is, from the bottom of my heart, I prosecuted on this issue. I was the face in terms of having all of these questions. You interviewed me many times. I was defeated in 2019. The voters didn't seem to care. And that's what you should be thinking about.
Yeah, I think to Lisa's point, Brian, the sort of strategic conclusions are very interesting. And I think they also, and I'm not sure what you think, reflect, like, everyone focused on, they didn't pivot enough to Trump. They didn't pivot enough on the Trump issue. My sense was the pivot that lacked was from Justin Trudeau to Mark Carney. And to Lisa's point, like, lots of this and the reaction to it sort of, like, to me, re-emphasizes or reinforces that idea that, like, they just have not, in a way, maybe I shouldn't generalize they, but the leader himself doesn't appear to have moved on too far from Justin Trudeau, or doesn't want to, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to say, and the last point might be the most prominent in the sense he doesn't want to. We had so much success for a good, solid, year and change on going after Trudeau, going up 20 points ahead in the polls, that maybe he just hopes that he can grab some of that magic again. And look, there's a bunch of other things to consider. Carney is doing quite well. His personal brand is quite popular, so they're probably trying to figure out a way to take a few points off of that, and they think maybe by attaching him to Trudeau as much as they can, or the government and the people that are a part of power in that government, is a way to do that. Now, I'm not sure it's all about strategy in this case. I mean, sort of long-form podcasts and sort of these types of interviews, maybe he just got comfortable, as Tom kind of mentioned, and was talking to his base. So that could be it too, and it's just something that he just is actually pretty irritated about from his point of view. He thinks something more should have happened. But I will say from Tom's points, I agree a lot. I will add one thing, though, that Lisa said. I do think that it's not necessarily with the base that he's going to lose points on this. I think it's more the general public, right? It's people that will kind of say to themselves, oh, maybe it's time we give another party a chance. Some people maybe in central Canada, even in Atlantic Canada, and they see this type of thing, it's going to turn them off. And not necessarily, I think a lot of people, it's said, and I agree with, a lot of people care, obviously, about these types of institutions and RCMP officers. Specifically, my father-in-law was an RCMP officer. So the idea that we all have these sort of, ideas of people that we know, or people that are in our communities that we don't know that serve, and we feel for them, there's that component, sure. But there's also the idea of attacking the institution. And just sort of undermining these institutions. And that's certainly something we've seen a lot from Poilievre. I'm not convinced that helps him with the general public. And not necessarily that the general public are all sort of the defenders of these institutions. Some of them will have complaints about institutions, there's no question. But it just feels like a Trump tactic when you're trying to undermine institutions. And I think for the general public in a general election, that's something Poilievre and the Conservatives would want to steer completely clear of.
I think even for, 40+% of the people who voted for the Conservatives in the last election, Benzie, a lot of them, if you look at public opinion polling, believe that the Conservatives are stronger on law and order, right? They align. I think they have the sense that the Conservatives are aligned more largely with law enforcement, right? That was their messaging last week until this podcast surfaced around all the legislation that was coming in, everything. So I would imagine that some of the pressure to put out this statement came from within caucus, right? And people who themselves felt a little bit uncomfortable with it.
There are a lot of Conservatives who feel uncomfortable about it, Vashi. You and I have spoken to some of them, and Dimitri Soudis, who is the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's Director of Communications, a close aide of the former Prime Minister, he wrote a scathing op-ed piece in the Star on Friday that was our most read story for much of the day, because so many people were poring over what Dimitri had to say. Basically saying that Mr. Poilievre hasn't evolved and he's not ready for prime time. And frankly, if you want to know how that party blew a 28 percentage point lead that they enjoyed on January 1st of this year and then lost the election, their fourth consecutive defeat, it's comments like that. It goes back to the leader. His campaign team, Jenny Byrne and others, got a lot of blame. I think a lot of it unfairly, frankly. And then you see things like this and you say, you know what, maybe it was the leader. It's not the team. It's him. He's the problem. And I think, look, maybe this helps him with some fringe elements in the leadership review in January in Calgary. But Brian's right. With the general public, the folks watching your show, Vashi, these are people who believe that the Mounties are the law of the land and are enforcing the law of the land, and they're not doing the bidding of any political party. It's just a very, very Trumpian thing to say, and I don't see how it helps him. And that's why he's clarifying and scrambling the way he is. And this is the first time that we've seen him do that in the years. And he's been a very disciplined leader. I think we all can agree. He's good on his talking points. He's a bright guy. But this shows a bit of panic because he messed up. And where did he mess up? On Northern Perspectives podcast, a podcast few viewers of Power Play probably have heard of.
Hey, you never know. You never know. But I do take the point. Okay.